Hello, my name is Kathryn Campbell, and today I'm going to be instructing you on how to paint a piece of furniture. This presentation is designed for individuals who have never completed a project like this before and have little to no background or knowledge or experience on painting a piece of wooden furniture. So let's get started. These are the things that we're going to cover in our presentation today. I'm going to go over all the materials that you will need to complete this project. I'm also going to discuss the preparation you do beforehand, and then we're going to go into sanding the piece of wooden furniture, and we're going to discuss priming and painting finally, and then a few finishing up tips at the end. So first, as far as materials go, you will need the actual piece of furniture. You'll need a plastic tarp, or trash bags work very well, and the purpose of this item is to lay out underneath the piece of furniture so you do not get paint or primer on the floor, or if you're painting on the grass, you also don't want grass shavings to get into the wet paint. So that tarp being laid down is a good barrier. You're also going to want a sander. You can use an electric sander or sanding paper. And then you're going to want goggles, gloves, a painter's mask if you're using spray paint. And I recommend using a painter's mask even for sanding. You're also going to need if you can, this is if you want to remove the hardware, which are the knobs or drawer handles, you're going to need a screwdriver to remove them, or if you want to cover them, you can use painter's tape and just tape over what you will need. Unless you want to paint them, then you won't need to cover them. You're going to need a flathead screwdriver to open the can of primer and the can of paint, so you'll need those things. You're going to need either a paintbrush or paint roller. That's up to you. I like a paintbrush personally. And then you're going to need paint trays to pour your paint into. Okay, so to prep, you're going to need to take some safety precautions. Like I said, when sanding, you want to wear gloves, goggles, and a painter's mask. If you're using spray paint, you do want to have a painter's mask as well. Next, for preparation, you're going to lay out your tarp, and if you're painting, like I said, on grass, it serves as an important barrier to make sure grass doesn't get on your piece of furniture, as well as paint getting on the ground. So if you're painting on sidewalk or on a hardwood floor or wherever, you don't want to get paint splatters on the ground. That tarp is very important. Then you're going to remove or cover the hardware, or you can cover pieces of the furniture that you do not wish to be painted. I have added a picture here of a piece of a chair with a cushion on it. You don't want to get paint on the cushion, so I've taped a trash bag over the cushion so that paint does not get on it, and I've used painter's tape to keep it into place. I used a trash bag, or you can use a piece of a tarp. You can cut out a piece of a tarp and tape that on as well. Now we're going to go into sanding your piece of furniture. If you have an electric sander, you want to be sure and get comfortable with it before you just start using it. Electric sanders can be very dangerous. Or paper sheets, which is what I've used in the past. It takes longer, but it's a little bit safer. And like I said, you want to make sure you have gloves on, because the paper sheets especially will wear your hand out. The purpose of sanding, just so you have this in mind, is to remove any previously existing paint or varnish, and also to rough up the wood, because if the wood is smooth, paint will bead up. It'll get little bead droplets and it'll run. but if the wood is rough, the paint will stick to it better. And so you want your wood to be roughed up, and you also don't want any, like if there's a dark, if the piece of furniture is painted black, you want to get all that black paint off so that it doesn't show through. And then to finish up the sanding process, you want to just dust away all of the residue because there's going to be dust everywhere. So to go into priming, you're going to select your can of priming paint, primer that you want to use. And then you're going to want to first open it with a flathead screwdriver, and to do that you just take the end of the flathead screwdriver and stick it into the crack of the top of the lid in the jar and pry it open. And then once you have that open, you're going to pour it into your paint tray, and then it's time you can apply the primer. You might need to do multiple coats of the primer. It's not required, but like I said, if you have like a dark piece of wood or if there was a black paint underneath or something, you're going to want to do multiple layers of primer to make sure everything's even, everything's smooth, and that's your last step, is to make sure all the coats are even and there's no wood or previously existing paint showing through the primer. Next, we're going to paint, finally, the piece of furniture. And painting is very similar to priming. First, you're going to open and pour your paint into a painter's tray. Then you're going to apply the paint onto your piece of furniture. Multiple coats are necessary for this. Paint dries a lot of times very thinly, and you can see through it, and like I said, you don't want anything to be seen underneath. Primer is usually white, and so if you're doing a white primer and then you're painting black on top of it, the white will be very visible underneath. So multiple coats are necessary, and just make sure each coat has time to dry in between. Primer underneath should not be visible after painting, and then once you're done painting and you see that everything is even and all coats are covering everything you want to be covered and that the primer is not showing through, you should be done. Like I said, let it dry before reattaching the hardware. You also want to make sure that it is dry before you remove coverings, because you do not want any paint to be beading down onto fabric or onto glass or whatever you don't want to have paint on it. So make sure everything is dry before you remove coverings and reattach hardware. And then finally, clean up. That's a very important step. It's optional, but I completely recommend cleaning up. So what we've covered today is we've gone over our materials needed. We've gone over preparation. We've gone over sanding the piece of wooden furniture, priming it, painting it, and the finishing touches that I call them. I hope this presentation was helpful, that you've gotten a lot of information, that I've helped instruct you on how to paint a piece of wooden furniture.